Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Pennsylvania and Berwind, where we are going to begin work on version 3 of the route. And the first thing we're going to be doing here, I'm going to do kind of in real time just to show you what I'm doing. And that is doing some retexturing mostly on the main line. It's incredibly boring, so we're only going to spend a few minutes on this, but I wanted to show you guys what my technique is to retexture the ballast line on the track here. And if you've seen some of my live streams, I've covered this in live streams a few times, but essentially the idea is when you're updating your textures to HD terrain, you're gonna want to sort of reset the textures underneath your track. You're gonna wanna kind of reset the textures in most areas. So the thing is with HD terrain, it's hard to explain, but there is a texture threshold between the 8-meter radius texture tool and 9-meter. So if you're doing texturing with the 8-meter radius and smaller, it's going to use HD textures. Anything larger than that, it's going to use SD textures, standard definition textures. I believe that that's sort of how it works. So if you want to have a nice clean edge to your ballast line or any of your textures and you're updating a route, you're going to want to reset the main textures to that HD version. So the first thing that I did underneath the track here is I created a scrapbook with like 2 or 3 common textures on my baseboard, and I painted that at 8 meters underneath my track. The next thing I did was I created a sub texture of this dirt texture here set to 6 meters, and I had my track selected and I ran the paint under selection. And now what I'm doing here is I'm running the paint under again set to 4 meters with the texture I'm going to use for my ballast line. And this is how I avoid some of those sort of clumpy, blocky textures from showing up around my right-of-way. Anywhere that you're going to want to use higher definition texturing with HD terrain, if you're upgrading a route, you're going to want to use an 8-meter brush or smaller. You can use larger brushes for background areas that you're going to fill in, but for the most part, you're going to want to use 8-meter or less. I thought I would do a little bit of this on camera here in time-lapse mode, but the texture refresh and the spline refresh is just too much. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna do some work on Oldtown today, but the first thing that we're actually gonna do up here at Oldtown is something I've been wanting to do for quite a while now, and that is we're gonna move the oil processing refinery up here behind Oldtown. It's just not quite realistic. It's not where it should be. So the first thing I'm going to do here is take these 3 baseboards here and I'm going to make them their own route. So I've got them selected here. I'm going to deselect them and I'm going to use the marquee tool and I'm going to delete the rest of the route. But don't worry, I'm doing this on a backup copy, an alternate copy that I'm going to save as just the oil refinery. And now I could probably do this with the scrapbook tool by copying and pasting the entire refinery, but for some reason in my head this seemed like an easier option. It kind of allowed me to keep the full 3 baseboards of the refinery, and it'll allow me to sort of have a little bit more freedom with where I move it. Ultimately I might end up rebuilding it anyway and it almost probably won't even matter, but this is what we're going to start with. So now we're left with just the 3 baseboards for the refinery. I will save it, and now I can port that back into my main copy of my route here. And it took me a few minutes to remember how to do this because I don't do it that often. You gotta merge all of the layers together. I don't know why it just doesn't do this automatically. All right, so now I've moved the oil refinery about 3 baseboards away, and that's where it's gonna stay for now. But what I wanna do is I also wanna lower it that much. So I decided to select all the assets on the baseboard and lower them collectively to the height that I want, and then I applied the smooth under tool. Don't do this, do not do this. It took about 45 minutes and it just made an absolute mess of things. it did kind of land me roughly where I wanted the height to be, so I guess that worked, but it totally destroyed any of the terrain here. So I had to spend a couple minutes with the smooth tool to sort of level things back out, but I have now lowered this baseboard by a few meters, which is what I want. But again, I haven't really fully decided if this oil refinery is going to stay here or what. But it doesn't matter because we are not going to be working on that today. We're going to be working on Oldtown. That's right, we're going to give this place a bit of a facelift. And the last time that I worked on Oldtown, or the oil refinery, was back in 2017. So almost 10 years ago. So we're going to give this place a facelift today. Let's get going. So to begin work on Oldtown here, the very first thing I'm going to be doing is, of course, we've got to update these old ash tow roads. They've been bothering me for a very long time, so that's the first thing that I'm going to attack here. But before I do that, I need to move some of these buildings around. I want to create a little bit more space in town and give it a little bit more of a similar look to some of the other newer areas that I've worked on, like any of the towns outside of Allegheny, outside of Phase 1. So I'm going to slide some of these buildings out of the way a little bit. I'm going to add in these sidewalks here. Overall, my goal with a lot of these updates is that I don't want to fundamentally change the entire build itself. I want to keep the character of the towns. I just want to update the assets here and maybe clean up the aesthetic a little bit, because obviously my build style has improved over the years, so I want to improve some of these old scenes, especially here, because it's been almost 10 years since I've worked on this. So I'm gonna do one of these roads here on camera for you. You guys have seen me do this 100 million times. So what I'm gonna do is just do one on camera, and then I'm gonna do the rest off camera here. In case you're new or you've never seen me do roads before, the way I like to do it is lay down the double yellow line first, and then I go into Surveyor Classic and use the spline point anchors as a spacer, and I lay down my white lines. And then I like to go back to Surveyor 2 and use the Texture Under tool to add asphalt textures underneath. I use 1 meter for the white lines and 4 for the yellow lines. And then I just come in with the brush tool and finish it off. And that's looking a lot better already. I also noticed that the McDonald's was a little cramped here, so we're gonna slide this gas station out of the way, and I don't know why I'm even bothering, because I'm gonna replace that gas station as well. So through the power of editing, I'm able to do all of these roads for you, and you don't have to sit through it. So here is the first mock-up with just the double yellow line. Here it is with the white lines added. And here it is again with everything all connected. And now using the paint under, I could quickly paint the outside edges of the lines, and with HD terrain, we get these really nice crisp edges. And then all that's left is to just fill it in by hand. And this is oddly satisfying to watch. And there is the completed roads, and it looks just that much better right off the bat. And with the roads done, now we can actually begin to play the game. And first things first, we're going to reestablish our sidewalk and move some of these roadside details around a little bit. Next, we really got to update this gas station. About a year and a half ago, LTG put together this gas station for me, which perfectly fits the 1980s era. I tried to pick the best gas pumps that would match the era appropriately. The gas prices are a little bit off, but that's okay. I'll take 89-cent gas any day of the week. And if that looks like a lot of just plain gray asphalt, that's because it is a lot. As I mentioned earlier, we are at the texture limit on this particular baseboard, so I'm kind of stuck just working with the textures that I have available. Once the inspect baseboard tool is released, I'll be able to fine tune those details a little bit. I could also add a color effects layer to add a little bit of variety. I really like the location of this post office here on the corner. It just seems appropriate, but I think it needs a little bit more detail. Until the Inspect Baseboard tool is fully released to Trainz Plus, I'm just going to be using some of the established textures here, including the ballast underneath the track and any grass or anything that is already localized on this baseboard. I don't want to introduce anything new because I don't want to lose anything important. The area behind Main Street, I'm not entirely sure what I'm gonna do with, but what I do know is that this big building does not belong here, so that's gotta go. We also definitely do not need this much parking in this town. I didn't necessarily want to over detail our main street, but I thought we could use a few more details like some clothing outside of the antique shop, as well as some seating outside of Otto's Cafe. I also kind of thought our school over here needed a little bit of a facelift. I kind of like the look of the building itself and the layout. It's just got that small town, small school. I mean, it's probably more of a daycare center than anything else, but ultimately I really liked the layout of it and the design, but it just needs to be spruced up a little bit. So we're gonna add a little bit of scenery here and just make it look a little bit more cohesive. The school did not have an entrance, so I thought I'd add one. As far as scenery assets go, I'll be replacing those separately. I need to figure out what kind of clutter assets I intend to use around here, but all of the spline grasses and the asset grasses are going to be replaced eventually. I also need to update all of the trees, from speed trees to the new plant factory trees, but I'm holding off on doing that until we have a bit more variety available. At this point, I'm going to direct my attention to the lumber yard over here. And I'd like to reimagine this place kind of as your local neighborhood garden center and hardware store. I don't want to mess with the buildings too much that are already established here, so what I'm going to do is just move them around a little bit, but I'd like to keep them. I'm kind of imagining that this was an old team track that sort of stayed in service over the years, and some of these buildings may have been used throughout the time that the area was utilized for rail service, and maybe they're not really so much used anymore, but they're still present. They haven't torn them down, so I'd like to keep them, but make them look a little more worse for the wear. Why I chose these planters here. They look awful. I thought there was another planter that I could use, but I was not able to find them, so I'm just gonna make my own. At this point in my route building career, I'm very interested in keeping things simple for me and easy. So I've been doing a lot of copying and pasting from previous builds. So I used a lot of these detail assets from other parts of the route. I even copied some off of the New York Cross Harbor route. And that just helps keep things simple. I'm going to use these assets anyway, so it's easy enough to just grab them all at once, put them down, and just rearrange them to fit this particular build. So I'd say this was a pretty good warm-up for getting back into the PNB. There's still quite a bit of work to do around Oldtown, and I'm pretty excited to get back into it. I think I'll probably continue this build in the next episode. I'll do a little bit of work off camera in between, but I think the next episode will work a little bit on the residential area as well. But that's about all I had time for this video this week. I wanted to make sure I got it out before the end of the year, and I was getting a little short on time. I'm really waiting for the Inspect Baseboard tool to be fully released to Trainz Plus before I could really get involved with some of the retexturing around here, and I'll play around with some of the residential buildings off camera for a little bit, and I'll show you guys probably in the next episode, whatever I manage to get done. As for the oil refinery, we've discussed maybe moving it to a totally different location altogether instead of it being on the Oldtown branch at all, so I'm considering that. I'll have to revisit that in the future. I'm definitely going to sit and chew on that for a little while before I make any decisions, but I really like the idea of continuing the Oldtown track beyond Oldtown and maybe into some more farmland, adding dairy farms and maybe another grain elevator and maybe another lumber facility. We've got a lot of lumber being produced on this route, and it doesn't have any place to go, so we need some more locations for lumber to go to. So I think that would be kind of a neat, short little train to run through Oldtown. But anyway, that's all I've got for this episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed. Have a happy holiday, and I'll see you guys in the next one.